So I was able to go out and do a little more testing on software version 2020.44.10.1, and I wanted to share a few thoughts on how that testing went and see if there are actually any improvements to Autopilot on this new software version for Tesla. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and let's get back to it. So I started out with the testing of software 2020.44.10.1, and I did try out the percentage versus fixed setting of the speed limit. So you can either set it at 5 over or any amount over automatically based on the speed limit for that street, or you can set it to go on the current speed. And you also have an option on the set speed version to actually go for a percentage. So you can do plus 10% and that sort of thing. Do keep in mind that it doesn't really do anything for side streets if that percentage is more than 5 over the side streets, because again, if there is no speed limit known, it's going to default to a maximum of 45 miles per hour. And if it's going say a 35 mile per hour zone, the max speed would be 40 miles per hour for Autopilot. It only will go 5 miles per hour on Autopilot or auto steer in those streets. So do keep that in mind. For me, this does not really do anything for me. I definitely always keep it on the +5. As I mentioned before, that is a good happy medium for a little bit faster than the speed limit, but slower than what people probably want to go. So I try to kind of appease people that might be behind me, as well as not go too fast, because if it was my choice, I would just go the speed limit all the time, but it does irritate people if you just go the speed limit, at least around me. So I did have a few thoughts on this update. I don't think that the phantom braking that I saw in 2020.44 is still present in 2020.44.10.1. So I do think that that might have been what they fixed, although it is hard to say. I will have to see if any more of that phantom braking does show up in future releases or in future testing. So I will keep an eye on that. But if you don't know already, phantom braking is a situation where there might be a shadow or something in the road which Autopilot will react to and suddenly brake in the middle of, say you're a 45 mile per hour zone, all of a sudden it might break down to 40 miles per hour pretty quickly. And there's really no reason for it to do that. It might just have seen a shadow or something like that it braked for, but then it just goes right back to the speed. So there's really no explanation for why it did that. And it did seem to be more present in 2020.44, and I did not notice it at all in .10.1. So maybe that is fixed. I do hope that that is completely gone in the rewrite. So the FSD beta that will be coming out later this year, I have not seen any reports of phantom braking being as much a concern with that version, but there's also a lot of other features that have been added, like turns through intersections and all that sort of thing. So navigate on Autopilot in the city streets is a huge difference, and maybe the testers are not actually noticing certain small things like phantom braking on roads that might have been already there. So definitely I will be on the lookout for that on this, more testing on this release as well as future releases. The other thing I have noticed with all of the software versions, all of the Autopilot versions have had this problem where it will tend to dip into turn lanes when it should not. So this does happen a lot more on streets where you're maybe coming around a curve and there's a turn lane on the left. You're curving to the left and there's a turn lane on the left, and Autopilot tends to decide to kind of dip into that turn lane, and then it self-corrects very quickly. But that is kind of a swerve back and forth situation, much like it does on the interstate when there's an on-ramp. But I've noticed that on side streets, it does this even if the turn lane has an obvious dotted line where it should not actually cross over into that turn lane. It's obvious that it's not part of the lane, and yet Autopilot does decide to kind of dip into that briefly and then come back. So that is something they really need to fix, and I don't anticipate that they're going to fix that until we get the FSD beta. So I'm definitely looking out for the FSD beta, really hoping to get that and test it soon. Really excited to see what it can do. And in my cases, I actually do have a very frequent U-turn that I do, which I would like to see if it has any ability to do that. I have been watching another YouTube channel, James Locke, who has been doing U-turn testing, but he's doing that testing on a street that is a forced U-turn. So there's not any actual need for the U-turn in my scenario. So I could actually, the Autopilot could actually decide to navigate past where I normally take my U-turn and just turn left into our neighborhood. But to get into our neighborhood and closer to where we live, we usually take the first entrance there, and it does require you to do a U-turn. So it is a turn lane, and then you do a U-turn, and there's 2 lanes on the other side. So it is doable, but it is a tight U-turn. So I would really like to see if it does that. Whereas the testing that I've seen is really just there's 2 lanes on either side of the street, and the U-turn can actually be done from the outside most lane. So it's not as sharp a U-turn as this case would be. So definitely be interesting to try that out. But in the meantime, I do very much like Autopilot as it is. It is very helpful. It's just a matter of refining some of these small details. Again, dipping into the turn lanes, that might be the most annoying thing. And then the tendency for there to be phantom braking, obviously they need to fix that, because if they have phantom braking, it's just not going to be usable. I would turn it off. In fact, I often do not use the Autopilot on side streets with the family because they get very irritated with it phantom braking, because it's like an erratic driver that's just kind of scared about anything that might show up. A shadow on the road, we're going to brake for it, so that's just unacceptable. But anyway, those are just a few thoughts on this software version, 2020.44.10.1. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.